first you born, then you live and die. So if tomorrow never comes, it comes at no surprise. Looking death into his eyes, yeah, I witness guys start to recognize, analyze their own demise. Some people wasting time, walking around hypnotized, blinded by success, impressed but can't identify what's real was fake because the money just intensify. Jealousy plus the hate that equals genocide. Hey y'all, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of Life on Diagonal. As always, I am your host, EB. I think I'm gonna stop saying that because somebody else hosted it. Ooh, we got a problem, and that's gonna tie right into what we're gonna talk about today. So I this topic just popped in. I'm like, this will be a perfect topic. But before we get into that, I will also like to say I am also the co-host of Thought Ops. Check us out on YouTube, and I am also the owner of the clothing line Healing Hyenas Clothing. As you can see, I have one of my hoodies on. This is my Raised in Akron West Side. I do have Raised in Akron East Side, North Side, South Side. So I was raised in Akron. So this is one of my hoodies. Check it out. Look kind of dope to me, but hey, y'all be the judge of that. So, and this is perfect. It's going to tie into what I want to talk about today. So, have you ever ran into somebody or you yourself um had an interesting, weird or crazy job? I have. And I will say right now, I have had basically kind of like the same job for over 23 years. I am a public school employee. I have been working for school district. I just recently transferred to another school district. But in my early 20s, I had a weird job, an interesting job. And when I tell people about my job, they are like, "What?" And one of the most unusual jobs I ever had was working at a cemetery where I buried people for 2 years. Yes, I buried people for a living in my early 20s. So let me tell you how this job came about. Shout out to my boys, Wes and JMO. Um, so my friends got me this job. At the time, I was working, so growing up in Akron. So if you from Akron or the surrounding areas, you'll know what I'm talking about. You'll know these locations. So growing up in Akron, I worked at Summit Mall. Worked in the food court when I was in high school. Worked at Charlie Steakery, cooking and all that stuff. So if you know what Charlie Steakery, I worked at Charlie Steakery. So something happened at the job, and I needed a new job. So at the time, was JMO and West both working there at the same time? I think my friend J-Mo had the job first, and at first it was summer help. Then he got my friend West the job, and I used to always look at both of them like, how in the heck can y'all work at a cemetery? And they was just like, man, it's just a regular job. So I just couldn't see it. I'm like, man, that is weird. That's morbid. How can you do it? And look, I end up getting a job there. So I needed a job. My boy West was like, "Hey man, I could if you know my boy West, the way he talk, that's why I'm laughing right now. He's like, man, I could put you on." And at the time, I needed a job, so I was like, "Oh, okay, well, just give me the job." So working in the cemetery, it's a lot of outside work, and I started in the wintertime. No, the late fall going into winter. Crazy time. It was cold outside. I remember my first day. The first day I worked there, we had 6 funerals. We had to bury 6 people. Um, the thing that sometimes when you read or you hear about seasonal depression, that is true. Because when I worked at the cemetery for those 2 years, we had most of our funerals. Um, in the fall and winter time, especially around holidays. In the summertime, we didn't have that many funerals. I remember it was times we would go like a couple weeks without even having a funeral. So, the seasonal depression and missing family members and people actually um, dying from missing their loved ones. That is true. So I remember first day, um, we had 6 funerals. I used to always hear stories from my friend Wes about people that worked there. It was this guy, I'm not gonna say his name, but he told me that this guy was weird. And he was weird. He told me that he was always falling in graves and he would fall in graves all the time. So I got this job at the cemetery, and over time, it was like it's crazy because it was like working any other job. Once you get over it, that you're actually working at a cemetery, um, it's like working any other job. It's like dealing with people, dealing with crap, dealing with politics, and I mean, it's crazy because, like I said, it's a weird job. You're around dead people every day, as long as living people. I mean, as well as living people. Um, so people would ask me like, "Well, how did you guys dig graves?" And they were like, "Did you dig graves by hand?" Yes, we dug graves by hand, and the graves that we dug by hand were basically people who bought plots for cremations. So we would dig those by hand. They would actually put the urn into like a case, and we would bury them. Um, at times it was tough because it would like people would lose kids and children, so we had like a section for babies and kids, so that would mess with you. But for the regular graves, we would use a backhoe, and um, it depends on what type of grave you bought. So I'm gonna give you a whole rundown. It might have changed um, since I left, but when I was working there in the early two, matter of fact, this is crazy because I was working there during 9/11. So that tell you this to you 2000, 2001. Yeah, so I was working there during 9/11, and I remember we had funerals that day when 9/11 was going on. So that's how far back um, it goes. So when I was working there, and like I said, it might have changed nowadays. When I was working there, we had regular graves and we had double depth. And so the regular graves was 6 feet deep, double depth was 12 feet. And what you could do is you could buy a plot, buy a double depth plot. It said if you didn't want to be buried next to your loved one, they will bury that we would dig the grave 12 feet. Whoever dies first goes in first. Other person will go um, on top. Now, the cemetery I worked at was it's in Akron. At the time, it was called Rose Hill. I don't know if it's still called Rose Hill. Um, but I know if you got buried in the ground, that you had to have a vault. Now I know there are other cemeteries where you could just put a casket in, but our cemetery, you had to either get a cement or metal vault. And they would tell you, I don't know, I don't know if I should dive into all that because I don't want to mess nobody's business up or mess. I'm just gonna say those vaults that they say that they're good for, they're not. I'm just gonna leave it at that. You can still get water in them and stuff like that. So yeah, so then we had a mausoleum and we had like a 6 level mausoleum that was outdoors. Then we had an indoor mausoleum. And it was crazy. I used to hate the mausoleums, the outdoor mausoleums, because we had a scissor lift. So just imagine this: we had a scissor lift. You can look up like scissor lifts and what a scissor lift is, and we would go up. Oh man, I don't want to get my on a scissor lift. We would go up. If say we had and with the mausoleum we had a single depth and a double depth um, mausoleum. So let me tell you what the preparation was like. Say we had a funeral, we get the paperwork like, oh, we have a mausoleum burial. We would we couldn't do it until no, but sometimes we would do it the day before or the day of. So we would so we would go up on the scissor lift, and it wasn't bad if it was like the first 3 levels, first 3 4 levels wasn't bad. It's maybe it was more than 6 levels. It was so long ago. I can All I know is the highest level had to be at least 40, 50 feet up in the air. So um we would prepare. We had like maybe 2 inch thick granite that went over that. Then it was like a plastic cover, and we had this canister of BBs, and we would throw the BBs in the mausoleum in the in the in the mausoleum in the I don't know what to call it. I don't want to call it I don't know what to call it, but it was just like you put the casket in there. I can't remember what to call it. You just put the casket in there. So if it was a double death, you throw the BBs, single death. We didn't. Yeah, we threw BBs in a single death. So this is the kicker. This is where it was hard. So say you had a double death, depth, depth, double depth. That means it's you put 2 caskets in there. So say you had one of those, and so a lot of families want to watch you. So it was nerve wracking because somebody had to go up there that worked there, and um, sometimes you had to go there by yourself. So what you would have to do, you would have to put the casket on the scissor lift, put a side step on the side of the scissor lift, and if you had like a 30, 40 foot one, you had to go up 30, 40 feet while the family's watching you. Say it's a double death. You get up there, you had to make sure the lift is level with the mausoleum. Now, mind you, you up that high, the wind's blowing, so you're swaying back and forth. So you would have to make sure that if you're, I think if you were on there, you ran it yourself. So you would have to make sure that you were on there, next to the building, close enough to get the casket in. Then you had to get the casket in, and once you got it in, you would have to climb up, get up off that step, and if it's a double death, you would have to go inside of the tomb. You would have to go inside the tomb and push the casket all the way to the back if there's nobody else in there. Now, if there's somebody else in there, you just push the casket closer to the other casket, just like you would do a single death one. Um, so then, while you're doing all that, mind you, everybody's on the ground watching. So the fear of like, oh my goodness, like the last thing I want for this casket to drop from 30, 40 feet of this people's loved ones. And so then we had uh a plastic cover that went over the tomb, and you have to caulk it, then you have to duct tape it, and you would have to put the granite back up. So now that I remember it, so if it was a single, I'm gonna say 12 by 12. If it was a single 12 by 12 granite, you had to go up there. You could go up there by yourself. You could go up there with somebody, but most of the time we went up there by ourselves. But then you would have to lift the granite, and then you had to put the granite up and make sure, hit the mic again, make sure that the granite is lined up properly, and then you had to screw it in front of. So you're doing all this in front of people's loved ones while they're grieving, and while they're going through one of the hardest times of their life, and you're just like, man, like hopefully this doesn't this doesn't turn out bad. Now we had one where even it was 6 stories, if it wasn't double death, it were single, and somebody would go up with you, and that 12 by 12 granite turned into a 24 by 12 granite, so you would need 2 people to lift it up and put it on. So that was some of the stuff that we had to deal with. It was interesting. We had to actually go to work. There were times we had to exhume bodies. I personally never looked at, the bodies that we exhumed. Like, we've exhumed bodies that had been there for years, 2, 3 years or whatever. And I would hear some of this stuff like, guys I work with, it was morbid. They would enjoy that type of stuff, but I didn't enjoy it. During funerals, sometimes we had to, push the body, and you would see dead bodies. My buddy Wes actually buried somebody he knew, so that was, crazy. There's a lot of stories I could go into with this, but I'm not, because this is too long for episode. Um, so did I run into anything um that was paranormal? I would say yes. Um, there were a few instances where I dealt with spirits working there during the summertime. One of the biggest goals was to cut the grass, and we used to hire summer help. So the summer help would like push mow the grass around the headstones, weed whack. And us working there full time, we would drive the lawnmower, so we would just go down the roads, drive the lawnmowers, cut the grass. And when I worked there, it would take us a whole week to cut the grass in the cemetery, and then you just starting back over. So it's just like a continuous cycle. You would do that, and then some days it would rain, you can do that, or you would help with, burials and stuff like that. So we used to we used to hide. We had plenty of places to hide. We would get a lawnmower, it'd be the end of the day, like, "Hey, I'm not cutting no more." We would hide and go sit behind the tree, hide, do something like that. So I remember it was a Friday, it was a payday. We had a foreman, he would always drive his truck trying to catch us sleeping and all that other stuff. So it was a Friday, nice day outside. Just got paid, afternoon, getting ready to go home. And we had to work every Saturday too, which sucked. But I am sitting on the lawnmower and I am sleep. I'm knocked out. I mean, I am just, like, knocked out. Next thing I know, I felt a tap on my shoulder. So I'm like, oh man, this dude caught me sleeping. So I woke up. No lie. I looked around. Wasn't nobody around. So I'm one of them type of people. I'm not trying to figure out what happened. I'm not. I don't want to discover anything. I started my lawnmower up and I got the heck up out of there. It was another time where it was real foggy in the cemetery, and we saw a lady in a white dress walking in the cemetery. And when we got to that area, it wasn't no lady. Um, in that area. So, like I said, I could just go on and on about stories or whatever for those 2 years I worked there, and it was an interesting job. The pay sucked. I don't know how much the pay is now, um, but it wasn't worth the work. The things that we had to deal with. When my mom passed, I thought, you know, that experience of me working at the cemetery would help me. I'm like, oh, like, hey, I know this is my mom, and this is a traumatic experience. But I worked at the cemetery for 2 years. Worked around dead people. I buried over hundreds of people. I should be able to handle it. And I was wrong, super wrong. It's if you haven't had a parent pass, or especially your mom pass, and for you to be at a service just looking at your mom's body in a casket, it didn't prepare me. That's all I gotta say. It did not prepare me. So I just wanted to talk about that because I thought this would be an interesting topic. People have interesting, unusual jobs that it's not the typical place of employment. So, you know, leave, comment. Let me know if you had any type of interesting jobs where people looked at you like, you work where? And they just kind of side eye you. So, I wanted to, have a little fun and hear about other people's experiences where, they work at. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Life on Diagonal. Like, share, and subscribe, and be on the lookout for the next episode. I don't know what I'm gonna talk about, so probably something that's bothering me. So we'll see. All right, peace.
Think about it. First you born, then you live and die. So if tomorrow never comes, it comes at no surprise. Looking death into his eyes, yeah, I witness guys start to recognize, analyze their own demise. Some people wasting time, walking around hypnotized, blinded by success, impressed but can't identify what's real, what's fake because the money just intensify.